In the cozy ambiance of the suburban coffee shop, the aroma of freshly brewed espresso mingled with the faint hum of quiet conversations and the rhythmic tapping of laptops. At a corner table near the window, Elijah sat alone, the soft morning sunlight casting a gentle glow on his weathered face. His hands, calloused and strong from years of labor and service, cradled the warm ceramic mug. His deep-set eyes, sharp and alert, observed the world outside, a habit ingrained from his years in the military. The navy blue cap resting on his head bore the words Vietnam Veteran in gold embroidery, a quiet testament to a life of service and sacrifice. Across the cafe, the bell above the door jingled, announcing the arrival of Karen Parker. In her mid-40s, she exuded an air of entitlement as she stepped in, her pristine white sneakers and matching designer tracksuit clashing with the casual, earthy tones of the room. Her sharp gaze swept the cafe like a predator seeking territory, locking onto Elijah's table, the seat she always claimed as her own. Without hesitation, Karen stormed over, her heels clicking with purpose against the tiled floor. "You're in my seat," she declared, her voice cutting through the gentle murmur of the cafe like a blade. Several patrons glanced up, startled by the sudden intrusion of tension. Elijah slowly raised his gaze, his calm eyes meeting her glare with quiet resolve. "Ma'am, it's a public space," he replied, his voice even, almost disarming. "Feel free to sit elsewhere." Karen's eyes narrowed, her frustration bubbling over. She leaned in closer, her voice rising. "You people are always so rude. No respect for community spaces." The quiet comfort of the cafe fractured as a murmur of unease spread through the room. Elijah sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping slightly under the weight of memories too familiar. "Ma'am," he said, his tone steady but firm, "I'm just here for my coffee. Let's not make a scene." His words, calm yet resolute, hung in the air, a quiet call for decency. Karen's irritation blossomed into outright hostility as Elijah's calm demeanor deflected her demands. Her voice, sharp and shrill, rose above the gentle murmur of the cafe, drawing the attention of startled patrons. "This man is threatening," she declared, her words teetering between manufactured outrage and seething prejudice. "People like him don't belong in places like this." Her tone was laced with a venom that carried decades of unexamined privilege. Elijah remained seated, his composure unshaken, though a flicker of weariness passed over his face. He had encountered this before, the misplaced rage, the pointed accusations, and knew engaging would only fan the flames. His silence, however, seemed to fuel Karen's indignation. She leaned in close, her presence invasive, her insults piercing and personal. Words of derision spilled from her lips, each one calculated to wound. The cafe, a place of quiet refuge moments ago, had turned into a pressure cooker of tension. The barista froze mid-pour, the hiss of the espresso machine the only sound cutting through the heavy air. Other patrons exchanged uneasy glances, some reaching for their phones as if to record, others too stunned to react. Then Karen did the unthinkable. Gripping her nearly empty latte cup, she threw the lukewarm contents directly onto Elijah's chest. The liquid splattered across his plaid shirt, soaking the fabric and leaving a streak of foam trailing down his torso. Gasps erupted from the onlookers, the collective shock palpable. Elijah slowly stood, his imposing frame now drawing every eye in the room. The soaked fabric clung to him, emphasizing his steady, deliberate movements. He met Karen's smug expression with an unwavering gaze, his voice calm, yet charged with quiet strength. "Ma'am," he said, each word deliberate, "you've made a mistake, but I won't let you shame me." The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the faint clatter of a spoon dropping to the floor. Karen's smirk faltered, uncertainty creeping into her expression. Elijah's unyielding dignity hung in the air, a stark contrast to her petty display. Karen's smugness began to crumble as a young man in his 20s stood abruptly from his table, phone in hand. He angled the camera toward her, his voice cutting through the tension. "Ma'am, you just assaulted a veteran. That's going viral." Her face twitched with indignation, but her sneer faltered. "Veteran?" she retorted, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Don't pull that card." From across the cafe, an older man called out, his voice steady but firm. "He's wearing his veteran cap, lady. How blind are you?" His words seemed to unlock the room, emboldening other patrons to voice their disapproval. "You've gone too far," someone muttered. "Show some respect," another added. Karen's confidence visibly wavered as the weight of collective judgment bore down on her. She opened her mouth to retort, but faltered when the cafe manager approached, his expression tight with concern. "Sir," he said, addressing Elijah, "are you all right? We can call the police if you'd like." Elijah shook his head calmly, pulling a handkerchief from his back pocket to dab at the wet stain on his shirt. "No need," he said, his voice steady and composed. "Let's not escalate the situation." Karen, now acutely aware of the room's disapproval, stumbled over her words, her bravado evaporating. I didn't know he was a veteran," she stammered. "It's not my fault, he—" She stopped abruptly as Elijah reached into his wallet and withdrew an old photograph, placing it gently on the table. The photo, worn from time, depicted a young Elijah in military fatigues, standing tall amidst a group of his squad mates in the dense backdrop of the Vietnamese jungle. His youthful face was resolute, his posture proud. "I fought for the freedom you enjoy," Elijah said softly, his eyes meeting Karen's. "I bled for it, and I'll stand for it again if I must." The cafe fell silent, the weight of his words pressing on everyone present. Karen looked at the photo, her face blanching as she realized the depth of her misjudgment. Around the room, patrons stared, their gazes a mix of awe and quiet fury, as Elijah's unshakable dignity eclipsed the ugliness of the moment. Karen's face turned ashen as the whispers around her swelled into an audible murmur of condemnation. Eyes that once avoided her now locked onto her, their judgment palpable. The young man who had recorded the incident held up his phone, the screen already displaying dozens of shares. "It's live," he announced, his tone cutting. "Everyone's seeing this." Notifications began pinging from various phones around the cafe, the sharp sound punctuating Karen's mounting panic. She clutched her designer bag tighter, her lips trembling as she scanned the disapproving faces surrounding her. A few patrons shook their heads in disgust. "Shame," someone muttered loudly. The word rippled through the crowd until it became a quiet but undeniable chorus. Unable to bear the weight of her actions, Karen turned abruptly and bolted for the door, her steps hurried and unsteady. Just as she pushed through the exit, one final "shame on you" echoed behind her, delivered with a sharpness that seemed to cut her resolve. Inside, the tension eased as the cafe settled back into a semblance of normalcy. Elijah remained seated, his movements measured as he took another sip of his now lukewarm coffee. The manager approached nervously, wringing his hands. "Sir, I'm deeply sorry. Please, let us cover your bill." Elijah gave a small, understanding smile and shook his head. "No need," he said, rising slowly. "We all have our battles. This was just one of mine." As he stepped outside, the crisp morning air greeted him like an old friend. Elijah paused, inhaling deeply, letting the tension of the moment dissipate. The confrontation hadn't shaken him, It had only reminded him of the ongoing fight for respect and equality. His resolve, forged in decades of service and hardship, remained unbroken. Back inside, the young man with the phone turned to the manager. "That man deserves more than an apology," he said firmly. "We owe him recognition." As Elijah walked away, the city around him hummed with life, oblivious to the storm of reactions unfolding online. For Karen, a reckoning awaited, one she wouldn't escape. For Elijah, it was just another day, another stand for dignity in a life defined by resilience.